Good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy Thursday, July 10th. I am Manila Chan. That over there is Ted Rall. You're tuned in to the Ted Manila Information Show, or TMI Show for short, because we bring you way too much information. Sometimes it's stuff you're grossed out about and don't want to know, but you're going to know it because we're going to tell you.
Whether you like it or not.
We're going to tell you. We're live Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern time, so please be sure to hit the like button, the follow button, the subscribe button, especially you out there in YouTube world. Don't be creep watching the show. Help us out. Hit that red subscribe button. We have a lot to get to today. The main focus on today's show, just not because we intended it, but there's just a lot of immigration news happening, both here domestically in the U.S. as well as abroad in Europe, specifically the UK and in France. That's Ted's motherland. So we're going to talk about all sorts of immigration topics here. A friend of the show, Steve Gill, is going to be joining us to discuss at least the domestic side of all of this. And I see Steve. Hello, Steve. Good morning. He's just popped into the green room, the virtual green room. But for our domestic immigration story, this time it's kind of going in the other direction, Ted. Going to Mother Russia.
Should we just cut to it?
I think we just cut to it. So
let's do it.
With that, let's jaws this thing and tell you the story.
Well, just about 11 months ago, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree launching a new shared value visa program that is directed to conservative Americans who don't like the way things are going here in the U.S., and it's offering them spiritual asylum in Russia. Among the recipients of this program is a family called the Hares from Texas, Hares, like the rabbit, whose public asylum ceremony in Moscow was filmed and promoted by Russian state media. They're devout Christians who are farmers, They said they moved out of the United States to Russia because they no longer feel safe or aligned with the cultural direction here in the good old US of A. I feel like I've been put on an arc of safety for my family. Leo Hare, my age, 61 years old, is thanking Putin for allowing Russia to be a good place for families in this world climate. They are among the first Americans to get asylum under the shared values visa, which Russians call the anti-woke visa. So under this visa, you get residency and potential citizenship in the future. So it's like a green card to people from dozens of countries that are considered unfriendly to Russia, like the US. It's for people who profess to be aligned with what the Russian government says are traditional spiritual and moral values. 700 people have been approved so far, according to Maria Butina, who's a lawmaker there in Russia. She's a member of the parliament, and she's a vocal proponent of the visa through her Welcome to Russia initiative and her show on state television. While the Russians say they're not actively recruiting anyone, nevertheless, you can easily find out about it through YouTube or Telegram. You'll find American and Australian families talking about the advantages of affordable health care in Russia, free education, traditional family roles, the absence of LGBTQ plus stuff. One relocation service even lists the anti-gay laws as a benefit, underscoring the ideological alignment that defines this program. Of course, like whenever you move to another country, there's always challenges. The Hares themselves got cheated out of $50,000 after they got to Russia, and they say the local cops weren't very helpful. Another family from Canada said that their bank accounts got frozen shortly after they relocated. They kind of said, well, maybe we shouldn't have moved, but then they changed their mind again and said, oh, sorry about that. The Russian government is still promoting it nevertheless. They have things like maternal capital, which is a cash grant to new moms. Extended parental leave is viewed as a sign of support for big families, particularly conservative families. And so there's the whole question here. Obviously, look, there's bureaucracy in Russia that is unfamiliar to Americans who have a different, not like we don't have bureaucracy, ours is just different. And the infrastructure is like not the same as ours. And obviously, learning Russian is a major challenge for anybody who doesn't speak Russian. So, yeah, that's how this is going. It's an interesting thing. It's kind of been on the DL, and the Washington Post broke the news about it.
Well, sort of. It's at least, well, for obvious reasons, I knew about it last year when this news broke. And there have been, I mean, as you noted, almost 1,000 people, and I'm not sure if they mean 1,000 individuals, including children, or if it's 1,000 separate families. But they're Westerners from the United States, from the UK, from France, and other European nations.
People, not families.
Individuals. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they're, these people have gone there, and for the most part, and let's not forget, Ted, there are thousands upon thousands of others who have gone there prior to the anti-woke visa coming into basically executive order is what Vladimir Putin did, right? There are thousands and thousands of other Westerners and non-Westerners, Asians alike, from, like China or Thailand or whatever, going there for whatever reason, to better their lives, for their careers or whatever. And you can find countless videos on YouTube, on Rumble, of these people documenting their lives as expats in Russia. And they, for the most part, from what I've seen, have seemed to like it. As long as their cultural values align with what's happening in Russia. And granted, most of these people live in the major metropolitan areas like St. Petersburg and Moscow. But I suppose that's why they're there, right? Is for like the economic progress that they can achieve by going to those major cities. So to discuss more of that, because I've not been there. I don't know if you've been there, Steve, or Ted. Have you been to Moscow?
Many times. Yeah, many times. Manila, you need to be a little closer to your mic.
How about now?
Much better.
So I guess I'm the only one that hasn't been there, but our friend, I'm bringing him on stage, Steve Gill, our buddy there,
hey, Steve.
has been has been to Moscow many times. Steve Gill is, of course, an attorney and CEO of Gill Media, a Nashville, Tennessee-based public affairs media and marketing company. He also served as the director of intergovernmental affairs for the U.S. Trade Representative Office. And, of course, he was one of Ted's spouses, work spouses.
That's right. In a very non-gay way, very as heterosexual as possible.
Speak for yourself, Ted.
Hopefully
All right,
Putin's
Steve.
not watching today.
Give us your top line thoughts on this. I mean, there are several American families that have made this trek because they feel that, especially this happened, under the Biden regime. A lot of American families, a good handful of them, have departed the good old US of A and said that America's cultural values no longer align with how they want to live their lives and what they see fit for their families, their small children, and they mostly are citing all the woke stuff. So what do you think about that, going to live in Russia because you're that anti-woke?
Yeah, I think that there's no doubt that Russia is more culturally aligned with traditional U.S. values, Christian values, the traditional values. And I think that has changed dramatically a bit over the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, the alcoholism that was an epidemic in Russia has pretty much been eradicated. The prosperity, the economic growth there. I mean, I think Americans still have a vision of Russia from the 1970s, images of just cinder block buildings and empty grocery store shelves. Nothing could be further from the truth. And I think the other thing that I would point out is how welcoming I've felt the last couple of times over the last 2 years that I've been in Moscow and Samara and some other areas in Russia. I expected that because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the fact that U.S. weapons and munitions and money have been applied to Ukraine that are killing Russian men and women and brothers and sisters, I expected that there would be some animosity towards Americans in Moscow and these other places. I didn't get that at all. In fact, they are very interested in America. They love America, Americans, and I was very pleased that kind of atmosphere was there when I anticipated that there would be some pushback to being an American. So I think that these Americans that are going there will have challenges. As Ted pointed out, the language is difficult. My tongue does not do that very well. The food is great. The safety and security you feel in a big city like Moscow is incredible. I was having dinner one night at one of my favorite restaurants in Moscow, Dr. Zhivago. It's right across the street from Red Square. And there's not a cigarette butt on the street. Women were getting off the subway at 2:00 in the morning, and no security issues, no crime concerns at all. So when people ask, why Vladimir Putin gets reelected with such numbers, why the Moscow mayor gets reelected by such numbers, you just have to compare the atmosphere and the safety and the prosperity in Moscow, for example, with what L.A., San Diego, San Francisco, Chicago, New York. It would be a dramatic positive difference, but there would be cultural hurdles to overcome. I'll share one quick story. A friend of mine is a comedian. She speaks Russian. She has spent time in Russia. And years ago, she was in Russia and was relating the story that if you go to a museum in Russia, and Ted will attest to this, if you're Russian, it's free. It's part of, again, the benefits of being Russian. If you're a foreigner, a tourist, you have to pay a fee to go to the museums in St. Petersburg and Moscow or anywhere else. So she decided she would try to fake it because she spoke Russian very well. So she goes up to the Russian door, and the Russian guard says, wait. You are not wearing enough makeup. Your eyeliner is very subdued. You're clearly not Russian. And she goes, what, that doesn't mean anything. And he goes, and you are smiling at people. That is not very Russian at all. You are not Russian. But then he kind of looks at her and says, yes, but you are cheating and trying to steal your way into the museum for free. That is very Russian. Come on in.
Go on in. Well, that's a good. I mean, Steve, I'm glad you referenced the Russian sense of humor, because that's a huge part
yes.
of Russian society. I mean, they are They definitely like a good laugh, and
They're hilarious.
and they're fun to hang out with for sure.
One other quick point, because I literally just had this one come up the other day. One of my business partners was working with some Russian clients years ago who were interested in developing a for-profit prison center. By the way, Maria Butina, who's referenced in the story before, was actually in the U.S. many times trying to work with the NRA, the National Rifle Association, to develop the basis for gun ownership in Russia. So there are things they were trying to adopt and adapt from us that they were trying to bring there. They were trying to have more private ownership of guns, and Putin was very supportive of that. She got caught up in other controversy, but the guests from my client were interested in privatization for-profit prison systems. So they were here touring Corrections Corporation of America, which is now Core Civic, which operates for-profit private prisons across the country. And they were touring one of the prisons here in Nashville with one of the senior executives from CCA. And so they're asking questions. And one of their questions in that deep Russian accent was, where is the VIP section, the VIP section? And they're saying, no, there's no VIP section. Everybody's the same. And, can you bring in your own food? Can your family bring you food? Can you have a chef? And the guy, no. Everybody eats in the same area. Everybody eats the same.
Can you have a chef?
And then he says, well, what about pets? Can people have their dog? Can they have their cats? And it's like, no, you can't bring your pets to prison either. And finally he goes, what about fish? What about fish? And the CCA guy goes, fish? Yeah, we serve fish in the cafeteria pretty regularly. He goes, no, I mean fish. And he goes, yeah, we serve it in the cafeteria sometimes. He goes, no, I mean fish in tank, in your cell. No, you can't have a fish tank in your cell. So I think they'd watched too many episodes of Goodfellas or these mob movies and had a different impression of American prisons. But there are cultural and understanding differences that you would run into if you moved to Moscow.
Ted,
no, yeah, no, I mean, look, I like Russia. I could easily see living there. And it is striking that it's not like there's no gay people there, but it is more traditional. Like basically, even when you just sort of see generic men and women walking in the streets, there's sort of like more of a sense that it's hard to quantify, right? But it's like, guys just be looking like guys. They're not laying it on super thick, but there's no denying it. And women are more feminine and all that. And it's just like, it's something that it's not like being anti-gay is really sort of something Russians go around thinking about every day. It's more just the absence of it is normal, if that makes sense. You just don't see a lot of that going on.
It's really what we used to have in the U.S.,
right?
What we used to have here, Ted, that, look, what you do in the privacy of your bedroom is your business. And we have moved from that. I think this is where the wokeness and the cultural distinction that Russia is adapting is fine. If you want to do that, don't flaunt it. Don't get it in my face. We don't need to have, half naked men walking down the streets in gay pride events. I think it's gone from, it's your business to you're making it my business. And I think that's where, Christians wanting to go to Russia are saying, yeah, we're done with this.
I mean, obviously, it's ironic because, most in the American mind, Russia is still associated with communism and, and the left and, the Soviet period. But that's just, and that's clearly part of the history. And the Putin administration has never run away from that. They haven't torn down the statues. They're completely comfortable with owning it. But at this point, it's like, it is a more conservative society in terms of those values and everything.
But it's definitely a capitalist society. Let's not forget. That's now what people.
But the thing I'm curious about is like, okay, so, all right, like there's this in the article. There's this family from rural Texas, right? Because they're farmers. I mean, down there on the farm in rural Texas, you know what I'm going to say, Steve. I mean, how many
gay pride parades?
How many gay pride parades? How many trans people are really bothering them? How many people are coming around saying, hey, Sharia law is awesome. I mean, there's just, they're left alone. I mean, they have to like look for it and watch and drive into Dallas or Austin or
I
or
think,
watch
Ted,
it on TV or
I
something.
I think that's what the concern is, though, because look, you guys have grown children. I have a little one, so I get the concerns. Is that in American society in 2025, if you have a little kid, you cannot get away from the rainbow flag stuff. It is subversive. It's in there in kids programming. It's in there. I mean, literally, you can't be watching stuff like Bluey. You know, this is for preschoolers, right? They're doing like a lot of this.
What's Bluey?
This very slight Bluey is like a blue dog cartoon.
Is he
but
gay?
It's no. But
okay.
then they introduce like themes and stuff. So I think that's probably what the families that are trying to escape America going over there, I think that's what they're thinking about, is that they don't want their kids growing up in a society, because even if you live in a rural place in Texas, it doesn't mean that you can escape the broad American cultural reach, right? It's
guys,
in your on your TV shows.
Manila, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Everywhere.
But I've got to also ask both of you guys, like, isn't it? It's a little bit ironic, right? That one of the appeals of this program is that there's a lot of stuff. There's support from the government, right? Like affordable college that's subsidized by the Russian government.
That's amazing.
Affordable health care, unlike we have here in our capitalist system. I mean, they're basically, these are conservatives, but they're taking advantage of a lot of things that really came out of liberal, left-wing politics, right? Especially economic policies. And I wonder if they appreciate, if they understand that, they see that, or they see the irony here.
What strikes me, Ted, is they're not having a big illegal immigration problem. So you're not having illegals jumping on board all these government benefits, which we have here. By the way, Bluey is apparently heterosexual in the cartoon. Rainbow would be the gay dog in the Bluey series. But keep in mind that Texas has been considering, or there's been an effort to build a giant Islamist-only community in Texas that they're not pushing back. So even in red state Texas, and again outside of Austin, which is the San Francisco of Texas, right, you have the push that Manila is mentioning. That is counterintuitive of what you would think of would be a red state. Now, I'd agree. If you're living in rural Texas, there aren't a lot of gay pride, parades taking place, in the oil fields of East Texas. So I'm not sure that changed.
If I walk into a bar in my leather chaps, there might be an unfortunate response, right?
Yeehaw means something entirely different in some communities. I do want to point out that I think one of the other misconceptions that Americans have about Russia is that they may not think it's healthy. Again, if they're looking at through these 60s, 70s print of everybody being heavy and drinking vodka all the time, it is very healthy. First of all, I went into the same McDonald's that Tucker Carlson visited, and you have to use non-MGO meat, so it's not that pink taste you get at McDonald's here. Real non-GMO potatoes. Now, I failed to ask if their ice cream machine was working, but I asked Tucker when I ran into him, and he said yes, it was. So the McDonald's there, or what is the kind of branded as McDonald's, because McDonald's departed during the Ukraine-Russia conflict. It was better food, tasted better, healthier food. And because Russians walk almost everywhere they go, you don't see the obesity problems that we have in the U.S. On the streets. People are healthy. They're looking healthy. They're thin. And again, it's mainly because they walk everywhere rather than taking a car to go 2 blocks.
They get their steps in. That's for sure. And to the point about safety, this is not, before anyone goes, oh, here goes Manila, the Russian propagandist or whatever. Again, I've never been there. I have experienced 10 solid years working with Russians. I enjoy them. I like them. I've learned a lot about their culture. And I have friends that live in Moscow, that are Americans that live in Moscow, or other expats that live in Moscow. And specifically, the women I know, I want to point out the safety factor that Steve brought up earlier. Like our friend Rachel Blevins, right? Rachel lived there for a year, and she was shocked. She was shocked that she can get on and off the metro, not be sexually harassed, not be worried she's going to be pushed off the ramp, not be worried that somebody was going to rape her or, snatch her off the street and, duck her in a corner and have their way. she felt safe. And she's a small, thin woman, you know? And she said the grocery stores are great. Everything's clean. And this, I mean, she's a good friend of mine, and I trust what she had to say about it. And she said, you know, the adjustment, if it wasn't just that my family was so far away, she said, I could definitely live here. She's like, it wasn't as big. She said it was more of an adjustment for her to go from her small town in Texas, where she's from, to come to Washington, D.C., than it was for her to go all the way to Moscow. She said she felt the safety that she felt from coming from her small town in Texas. And people know you, and they're just, you feel safe, that there's just this sense of ease.
I mean, look, I'm a New Yorker. Okay. I'm telling you, there's no comparison between New York City and Moscow or St. Petersburg. You absolutely can let your guard down. And
right.
I'm not saying they don't have, I mean, any city has crime, but there's no comparison. Sure. I mean, it's just, you know, I mean, you're never going to have schizophrenic people in this ranting in Moscow, screaming and talking and shadow boxing and threatening people.
Or here in DC, throwing poop at you.
But if that happened, the police would come and scoop them up, right? And take them somewhere. That's just, it's not like here where I never go a day without seeing that. Never.
Well, and it is not perfect by any stretch. I mean, the cab drivers will rip you off relentlessly, particularly if you're an American. You know, what you think you're going to pay. If you went to one direction, it was this much, and coming back, it's suddenly 5 times that much. Not because of surge pricing like we do with Uber. The cabbies will rip you off if you give them half a chance. So it is not perfect. But I think that what we need and Ted, you and I have talked about this. Manila, you and I have talked as well. We've all traveled. Countries don't get along particularly well. Governments don't get along particularly well, but people do. And I've long believed that if we could do a really good, TV series of kind of like what Charles Kuralt used to do where he'd travel around America. If Russians saw more of what America is outside of New York and Hollywood and those big cities with that kind of our festivals, our events, our people, and if we had the same kind of thing from Russia of what real Russians, real life is like there versus, again, these pictures of the Cold War, I think we would, people to people, accomplish a lot better relations between these two countries and most of them.
Yeah.
I think throughout the Middle East, throughout Asia, if we knew more about each other, people get along pretty doggone well. It's governments that don't.
That's very true. I remember having this conversation with some Taliban guys in Afghanistan, and we basically were like, the government's here and the people are here, and we are not the same.
Yeah. I mean, that's everywhere. I feel like that's here in the U.S. But yeah, I always intended to go. I mean, never assuming that, all of this was going to,
you can still go.
This breakdown and and then I have a little anyway, I got to wait. I'll wait till he's a little bit older, my son, because he's 6. So when he gets to about 8 or 9, that's when they start having real memories, of their travels. So I might as well just wait till he's a little older to actually remember.
And closer to home. Again, one of the objections I have, and there are some disagreements. I know it shocks you, Ted. I have some disagreements with the Trump administration.
What?
But President Trump has just announced a $250,000 fine for Americans who go as a tourist to Cuba. We need more interaction, more people-to-people interaction, and I think that will harm the small businesses in Cuba that are struggling. I mean, it's not going to change the government, but it will reduce the amount of people who get to know real Cubans and Cubans who get to know real Americans. And
Steve,
and I think that's
on the same page. We're on the same page about this.
Agreed.
I mean, I've thought the same thing about like travel to Iran and efforts to isolate the people of another country. If that's all that's going to do is make you an asshole to them. And also, it's going to deny them the opportunity to get to know you. If we wanted to influence Iran and their culture and their politics and their economy, the best thing we could do is normalize relations, open tourism, get rid of sanctions, have Americans go visit Iran, have Iranians visit the United States. We get to know each other again the way we used to before the revolution, and we'd get along. And it's like, and Iran would liberalize because the Iranians would come back and say, in the U.S., like women don't have to cover their hair. They can it's nice there. We should do it here. that influence would be there. And like what we're doing is these sanctions cut off our nose to spite our face. It's a mistake.
As long as they could guarantee some safety and security that you wouldn't be kidnapped. I've been doing TV hits in Tehran about monthly or a couple of times a month for the last 6 months. Nothing lately. I hope the network is still alive and that the people there are alive. But they kept saying, you should come to Tehran. It's like, not on my life, because literally not on my life. But if they could, there are so many historic and amazing sites in Iran and throughout the Middle East that that would be amazing to visit, and people would go if there was some degree of safety and security. And when the State Department says don't go there, I've often ignored that, but I would pay attention.
I have been, and I had a good time. But
Well, look, bottom line, I would say, I mean, Americans are the least well-traveled culture in the world. I think other countries, I mean, they travel everywhere, right? It's important to them. And I always wonder, I mean, I get that our country is physically, geographically a giant country, and there's a lot to see here. But for most Americans don't even have a passport.
Yeah.
And so,
George W. Bush didn't have a passport before he became president.
Get out of here.
That's true.
Get out.
He
was the governor before. He never traveled outside
he was the governor,
US?
Yeah, and he lived on in a border state. Yeah, but back then you used to be able to cross into Mexico with just a driver's license.
Okay, so that proves my point. But for me, like, I lived abroad in the UAE for a few years, and I did a lot of traveling out of there, outbound into Europe, and you really get both a sense of what other cultures are like, and you start thinking, the wheels start turning, going, there is a different way of life that can be equally as good, although there's a give and take here and there. I might appreciate what I thought was freedom of speech here in the US before that got taken away. I had appreciation for that. But there, otherwise you go, there really are equally as good quality of lives that you can have elsewhere outside the US. And I think that's like the main point. I think I'd like to drive home for a lot of Americans. It's not because I'm trying to drive Americans out. I'm just saying that if you find a place that's more your vibe, you won't know until you go there, right? So if your vibe is Christian conservative values, in Russia's case, they're Orthodox Christians, but they're more of, I would say, culturally what America was like in the 80s. I would say, like we knew that gays were out there. We knew that there were what we called cross-dressers, right, in the 80s. Like, we knew that everybody was out there. Most people didn't really care. And that's kind of the vibe I get from all of my friends that live in and out of Moscow, in around Moscow. They say that's kind of what the vibe is there, that it's kind of like if America still made sense. That's what they told me.
Well, it's kind of like Manila and Ted. When I was in elementary school, I didn't know whether my teachers were married to a man or a woman. I certainly didn't know the sexual preferences
right.
that they had in terms of positions and perversions. It never occurred to me, and yet we're force feeding that down 5 and 6-year-olds, which is again, I think, where you see people like the Hares saying, we've had enough of it, because whether they're doing it right now in a particular school in Texas, they're doing it all over the place. And that is a distinct difference when you can't watch a single TV show in prime time where there's not going to be several gay characters, and making sure that they kiss and show you with them in bed, partially naked. Again, it is shoving it down our throats. And I think this may be an overreaction to say, fine, we're going to move to Russia. But I do think it reflects a broader dissatisfaction with where we have become versus, and a fear of where we're going.
Well, I mean, I think seriously, I think what happened is that we had decades and centuries of repression and brutalizing gay people. And then we had the gay liberation movement, and we've overshot, right? Like, basically, we've overcorrected. And what you would really want is basically like cultural depictions that just normalize sort of roughly proportionate shares to their population and their influence on our culture, yeah, you can have a trans character, whatever. And,
Right.
like in Billions, there's a
they're-
trans
they're-
character, and the fact that they're trans doesn't really impact
They're-
anything. But, like, you'd want it to just
They're
sort of be...
overrepresented.
They're overrepresented. Yeah, like, for example, there was a really interesting piece came out in the New York Times last week about how basically there's no straight white male novelists anymore who get major book contracts or win awards at all. Basically, like the New York Times notable new books list, which is the 25 top new novels of the year. Since 2020, there's only been 2 straight white dudes under the age of 42. And, I'm sorry, out of like, what, 125? That's just not right.
You guys have been really unpopular and under attack. And by you guys, I mean like Steve and Ted, cis straight white males from Christian backgrounds.
That's
you
true.
guys are the prime target of the woke.
Good luck pitching a book deal. Good luck going to Hollywood and pitching a TV show.
Or
Good
just watch a
luck
commercial.
writing a movie.
Look at a single TV commercial where you're going to see a white woman and a white man in a heterosexual relationship in a TV commercial. By the way, in terms of the repression of gays and the threats, violence to them, it always, Ted, blows my mind when I see the pride, gay, lesbian, transgender people marching side by side with the Palestinian pro-Hamas people in the streets. It's like, they would kill you and throw you off a building when you're talking about how great
Steve, there's a big difference between being pro-Palestinian and being pro-Hamas.
I agree that doesn't necessarily, but go to Palestine and flaunt your gayness. Go to any of these Middle Eastern countries that they are endorsing, whether it's Hamas or Hezbollah. Go there and fly your pride flag and see how long you last.
Well, it's all on the DL in countries like Afghanistan and Iran. It's all the little boys, little dancing boys, and the older guys who are getting busy,
Well, it was my understanding that in Iran, if you are gay, the state will pay for your trans surgery. But my understanding of the reason why, and these are from Persians that I know.
To effectively turn you into a straight person.
Correct. That's exactly it. So that way the appearance...
So twisted.
The appearance of heterosexuality is still out there. So the state will actually help pay and help you, send you to therapy and pay for your trans surgery. So in other words,
you like to fuck guys, then, you should be a girl.
Then you should be a woman. Yeah,
they don't mention, though, Manila, that the way they do their trans surgeries there are with those giant curved scimitar swords.
Oh, my God, no. But, so there's that.
Come on in.
I don't think they're doing... they're driving the wrong way. I don't think they're doing that in Moscow. So I think, it's just... No. I don't... They just kind of... They kind of just leave the rainbow flag population to their own little... communities and don't advertise it and they don't do the pride parades. They don't do, and this is exactly what the EU is like, pissed for example, at Hungary about.
In Moscow, you can't open a gay bar, right? And like
it can't be specific
that
to
sucks, kind of, right?
Well, I mean, it can't be specific to that for the same reason that you can't say this is an Asian only bar.
Right, but you can see the difference, right?
Panda Express, Manila. Panda Express.
If Panda served alcohol, I'd be there, Ted. Steve, this is like...
All
this
white
is,
guys
but that's
look the same.
That's right. I can't tell you guys apart. The past 10 years has brainwashed me. I don't know who's who anymore. Just white male, white straight male. I don't know.
Doesn't matter. We're all canceled anyway.
You are canceled. But me,
I'm the one
I
with
look
the
at
southern
these videos.
accent. I'm the one that says y'all a lot.
I look at this video and I get what a lot of these Americans.
Oh no, the video is making me want to go like right now. I've been like watching this the entire. Oh, it is beautiful, really.
I've never been, and I'd
the
really
counterfactual is, of course, obviously Russia in like the Urals is a little different from Moscow and St. Petersburg. That's in the same way that France is different outside of Paris, and in a good way too. I mean, I like rural Russia. I like rural France. I actually prefer it, but that's just it's a different thing. It's like here. I mean, you can't compare New York City or Washington to Montana. I mean, they're just very
Well, yeah.
different.
So I mean,
They're both
I
great.
think
They're
this,
different experiences.
Steve, what do you think is the takeaway of all of these stories of these Western expats from Australia, from the US, from Canada, that they're starting to move to Moscow mostly? What does that say
Yeah.
about our cultures?
I would really want to look 5 years, 10 years down the line, and follow up and see if the expats are gathering in expat communities. I mean, we see that in Asia, we see that all over the place. If you go somewhere and then huddle with your own kind, are you really becoming a part of the country, becoming a part of the culture? And again, I'd say,
Right.
when we've seen that here, when the Irish came here, they gathered in their Irish neighborhoods, Italians and Poles, and it's no different
Yeah.
than what we see today. And I would just say that if you're considering moving to Russia, you want to retain your American, Australian identity, but at the same time, if you're just hanging with other American expats, you're not really changing where you are. You're just changing your address.
Well,
Good
that's true. And
point.
also,
Yeah.
look, we also have to look at the calendar. I mean, President Putin is in his mid 70s, and he won't live forever. None of us will. And so, at a certain point, what will happen after he leaves? After he leaves power, how will Russian politics change? I don't think he has like a
Right.
designated successor. I mean, there will be elections, right? And so,
Yeah, and this
we'll see
was
what
an
direction
executive order.
the country goes after that. And I don't know if this program will even continue, or
Right.
if the general orientation of his party will continue to remain in
Is
power
into
or
that.
whatever. We just don't know.
Yeah. So we will see. Well, all right, we'll leave that the last word. We know Steve's got a full schedule ahead of him today. Thank you for joining us, Steve.
Thank you.
Always enjoy having you. Our buddy Steve Gill. He's an attorney, CEO of Gill Media over in Nashville, Tennessee. It's a public affairs media and marketing company. He also, if you guys don't know his background, served as the director of intergovernmental affairs for the U.S. Trade Representative Office, and he is Ted's totally straight ex-husband from
Very
Sputnik
straight.
Radio.
Both of us extremely straight. No sort.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys. Great
Steve.
to catch up. Thanks.
Bye, Steve.
Bye. All right, so there's that. It looks beautiful. I'll
Oh, it is beautiful.
I'll get in.
Yeah.
I'll get into the whole visiting around the world everywhere. I didn't know that buildings. This is, I guess, Russia. This is Moscow. Apparently, I've not seen these buildings before. This looks
Because
amazing.
everyone always. I mean, look, Moscow
Everyone looks at Red Square.
has iconic architecture. You always see Red Square, the Duma,
Yeah.
all that stuff. But you
I
end
didn't
up
know.
in the older parts of the city around Red Square. But there's definitely, it's a big city. And, probably the way I really realized how big it was the time that I had to fly into I'm going to mispronounce this, the domestic airport that starts with a D, Domodero, I think it is. And had to fly out of Sheremetyevo. So Sheremetyevo is like the JFK. It's the international airport in Moscow. The other one is more like domestic, but I mean domestic is sort of former USSR, so it also goes to Central Asia and for other former Soviet republics. Anyway, if you have to change from one airport to the other, they're on the opposite sides of the city, and you take basically the circular highway that goes around, like the beltway that goes around the city to get from one to the other, and that can take, with traffic, it can take a couple of hours. It's far,
Wow. Yeah. I mean, this is one of the places, iconic Red Square. I've always wanted to go. I'll just wait a couple more years till my kid's old enough to remember, and then we can engage in falconry and owlry and whatever other weird things that the Russians
go to
like.
Central Asia and do eagle hunting. One of my favorites. Man, you haven't lived till you've seen a golden eagle swoop down and knock a wolf.
That's what I'm saying.
Off a wolf.
When I travel,
they kill wolves. They knock them off like cliffs and then to their deaths. And then
to go pick at them. To go pick at their carcasses.
No, it's for the owner. Basically, you own, you have your own pet eagle, and then your eagle goes and kills things for you.
Oh
It's
my
so
God.
cool. So
Well,
cool.
so like I said, when I travel, I like to go see and do as the locals do. I don't want to
Mhm.
be in hanging out with other Westerners. Like I want to not be able to communicate with people and try my damnedest to try. But it looks really cool to me. This guy's we're watching a walking foot tour
Mhm.
of outside of Moscow, some other small suburb or city. And he's an American photographer that moved there, I guess, some years ago. I heard him speaking Russian. And they were saying, but he lives in Moscow. And they said, oh, you got to show us outside of Moscow because everything else is shite. And so he's like, okay, I'll go an hour outside of Moscow. And he's like, it doesn't look that shitty compared to like Los Angeles or like
No, I
what are
mean,
you
look,
talking about?
there are definitely look. It's a huge. Russia is the biggest country in the
Big
world,
fucking
so you
country.
can find shitty parts. I
Of
mean,
course.
no question.
Of course.
Like just like you can find shitty parts of the United States, obviously.
Yeah. All right.
I
So
mean, I would argue
we'll leave
most
that
of the
story.
United States is shitty, but in
Well,
terms of
most big
most
cities.
of it's it's the mid-sized cities, Manila, that are in real trouble. We don't talk about that, but it's it's for all the problems that cities like L.A.
Like
and
a
New
Cleveland?
York have. Like, yeah, absolutely, and like
I liked Cleveland.
Akron, Canton, Toledo,
I like Cleveland a lot.
Flint, Detroit, places like that. Those mid-sized Baltimore, those cities
Yeah.
are in real
Baltimore is
trouble. They're completely hollowed out.
real.
and gutted.
Baltimore is really bad. Really, really, really bad.
Yeah.
And with traffic, I'm roughly
Put me in the
with
worst.
traffic like 90 minutes.
Put me in the worst. Put me in like the worst neighborhood in New York City anytime over like breaking down at 3 a.m.
Baltimore.
in downtown Dayton, let's say.
Well, I would take New York City, any borough in New York, any time of the day, over nightfall in Baltimore.
Yeah, no, but Baltimore's scary, for sure.
Just saying. All right, let's go to the next story because I got to run.
Okay, let's do it. All right, so migration on small boats across the English Channel is going to reach its highest level ever this year, and numbers are breaking even before the summer peak begins. 21,000 plus migrants have already crossed the English Channel from France. That's up 55% from last year. Sir Keir Starmer is on track to oversee the highest year for small boat migration to the UK ever. Last year was also the deadliest. 73 migrants died trying to get across the English Channel, and it's only going to get worse this year. The Labour Party said that it would tackle this problem in its manifesto, and it's on the agenda with when President Emmanuel Macron of France comes over to the UK, presumably by plane, not by small boat migration, in order to visit the UK. 21,117 migrants arrived in the UK on small boats so far this year. That, according to the Home Office, that's a 55% increase over last year, when there were 13,574. Sir Keir wants tighter immigration enforcement from France. 330 boats have arrived illegally in the UK so far this year, and the number of migrants per boat keeps going up. Most common forms of these vessels are dinghies, kayaks, and rigid-hulled inflatable boats. But the problem is that when they're overcrowded, these vessels all are highly likely to capsize in those treacherous waters in the channel. The French generally, under law, are not allowed to intervene due to the risk of drowning unless they think that they're going to drown anyway and they have to save their lives. The French may announce that the police will be allowed to intervene up to 300 meters away from the French shoreline. The vast majority of those who arrive in the UK claim asylum, so that means 1 out of 3 asylum applications in 2024 is one of these migrants. Of course, these aren't all approved. 68% of the applicants do get asylum. The French recorded 158,000 asylum applications last year compared to 108,000 in the UK. Overall in the EU, there were nearly 1 million asylum applications last year. So they're having
When I hear
some
those numbers,
analogous
Ted,
problems to what we have in the U.S.
when I mean, relative to their original population or starting out population, let's say before this migrant influx, when I hear those numbers, though, I know it's relative percentage, but when I hear the numbers, just the numbers for their year is like what we get in the U.S. every month.
That's
It's
true.
so it's to me, it's kind of like,
Yeah, quit
oh, that's
complaining,
all.
quit whinging.
Like, shut up, Brits. That's hardly any people.
That's true.
But I will also say this is why, and I know producer Robbie's shaking his head. I will also say that because it's relative to their population, that those kinds of numbers are really big for the UK, being a small island,
Still
right?
smaller. It's still smaller per
It's
capita
small.
than ours.
Sure, it's small, but it has greatly changed like downtown London. It has greatly changed the culture. And I haven't been probably in about a decade, but from my friends that live out there, they tell me definitely that the view from London is very different than
Yeah,
I
can
last
tell you
saw
the
it.
view in Paris is different too. But you know, look, I'm going to say in a generation, it's going to end up making France a more vibrant and interesting place. You know, the cliche is that France is a nation of like white, you know, tiny white wine drinking Catholics, and it kind of used to be. But you know, look,
Producer Robbie's shaking his head.
there's been waves of immigration into France over the years. Right now, it's North Africans, and they're
Yeah.
very strikingly different looking than the quote unquote normal French. Before that, it was the Arabs from North Africa, and before that, believe it or not, it was people like Eastern Europeans, like Poles and Russians. There's a lot of Russian names in France. And now you're just sort of like, they just add to the richness of French culture. And, you know, they've made things more diverse. You know, you can go, there's restaurants that not every restaurant is French. There's, you know, other types of food. And it's kind of nice. I mean, you know, it's great to be able to get Moroccan food in France.
Immigration is great, but when when it's surging at this rate, as it is here in the US, you're completely, it's too much of a culture shock, I think. And I loved visiting France and I love visiting the UK. Like I truly love the UK. I love the music scene. As you know, Ted, I love a lot of these old UK like punk bands and other rock bands out of the UK. Love the UK music scene. But based on what I've seen from friends that are out there, and I have family in France, as you know, Ted.
I do.
I've seen a huge cultural shift, and it doesn't. I want to go to the UK to experience UK culture. I want to go to France to experience French culture. There's little Ethiopia here in downtown Arlington, Virginia. But there's little Ethiopia has become big Ethiopia.
Hate Ethiopian food. Hate it. With
Love it. I love
gross
Ethiopian
spongy
food.
bread that you eat.
I love that.
The bread and the
I love the spongy
gross.
bread. But I don't want to see it everywhere. There are Lao people and Chinese people all over Paris, but they're not taking over the streets of Paris.
Well,
and I think that's what people are complaining about.
Well, here's my question. Why is it always only just one way? So, for example, if we call it cultural enrichment if you import 3 million migrants from Somalia and you dump them right in the heart of France. Okay, fine. You're culturally enriched. Enjoy your crime. Enjoy your rapes. Enjoy the cultural degradation. Enjoy the suicide of your nation. My question is why is that acceptable? But if 100,000 Dutch people want to go to South Africa, oh, you're colonizing. You're bringing running water and electricity. You racist bastard. But the reverse is perfectly fine. Explain this to me like I'm slow and stupid.
Okay, I think I can do that unless you want to take a shot at it, Manila.
Ted, you try.
All right, let me try. All right, so the difference is
because you're whitey.
Is when colonists go somewhere, like for example, let's say Jewish colonists from Eastern Europe who go to Palestine. It's one thing to say, we'd like to buy land, we'd like to live here and just live peacefully side by side and buy each other's food and maybe intermarry. that's one thing. But then there's colonizing, like with the British. That's colonizing. When they change over to, we want to tell you what to do. We want to run the government. We want to set the policies, and we want to kick you out.
So
that's different. That's different.
Welcome to Sweden. What's the name of that little enclave? What the hell, Mamo, something like that, where they have Islamic courts. The local Swede population has been expelled, like they don't live there. That is colonizing, Ted, by your very definition you just gave. That dude right there, that's not an Englishman. Sorry, hate to tell you that. If you're a black
but
dude,
he will be an Englishman. An Englishman is someone who lives in England.
No, it's not. 100% it's not.
That's not what we think. When you think of an English rose, that's,
An American is someone who lives in America.
Nation is...
I don't know. I don't know that an American is just anybody that lives in the United States. I think you're
I think it
born
is.
and raised here, or even if you came here when you were young, you grew up here.
I think you become an American as soon as you have legal status to live here. You become an American.
Fundamentally disagree. And I think that's a big part of the problem with the whole immigration thing. Like kind of what Mr. Steve just said about the expats going to Russia. If I ever immigrated to Russia, I never will. I'm an American. My family's been here for 500 years. I'm going to die here. I'll be buried here. I have no passport. I'm one of those Americans that doesn't have one. I have nowhere else to go. But even if I did, I would stay. Even if I went to Russia, I would live with the Russians because I would want to assimilate to live in their society.
Sure.
We don't do that.
You wouldn't go there and say, "Hey, fuckers, you all have to learn English, and you have to, start, and you have to watch our TV, and we're going to tell you what to do." That's colonization.
Exactly.
Right. That's colonization.
So Ted, when you voted in the last election there in New York, how many languages were your ballots in?
Do I still have my? Here we
Probably
go.
at least
I think I still have it. I know this will make your eyes bleed, but here's the voter guide, one side of it, the other side. So let's see. I will answer that question.
That's colonization right there, Ted. By your definition,
I'm going to go with
your
6.
definition. That's colonization.
I'm going to go with 6. Well, so I don't know if, I'm not deeply involved in like British or French politics. I have a good baseline understanding of how things are and things work over there. But I think what we saw a lot of, like with the yellow vest protests, like in France, was, like the increased retirement age, the price of gasoline going up and all of that stuff. It's exacerbated by the fact that they have like these nationalized healthcare systems that cannot support the volume of people coming.
Look at them. I mean, those people, personally, I would call them invaders. I mean, they're not going there legally. They're breaking the law. And if England was a serious country, like if I was King Robert of the House of Windsor, I would order the British Navy. I would sink every fucking one of them. I would send a message. You come here legally. You will feed the fishes. And I have no problem with it because my job is to defend my country. That's my job.
No, it's true. Like I always think about like one of the longest borders in the world is between China and the former Soviet Union, right? And that's quite the fortification they have there, right? It's thousands of miles long. They have 12 miles of no man's land on each side of the border, with minefields that are swept daily, and biting dogs and that are trained to dodge the minefields. Every half kilometer, there's a watchtower with an armed guard, and if he sees you, he's going to shoot you. He's going to shoot to kill, and let the bitey dogs take care of the rest. And nobody crosses, right? I mean, they just don't.
Okay, let's move over. We got to go. I got to go, but let's quickly move through that last story. And Robbie, I want you to stay on because you work in the medical industry. I think you have some opinions about this last story, about
all immigration.
Also about immigration.
All right, some hospitals are going without essential staff because the international doctors were delayed by the Trump administration's travel and visa restrictions. We don't really know exactly how many, but doctors interviewed by the AP say they've gone through years of work and training only to be stopped by what is normally just a standard procedure. So the medical community initially was worried that many hospitals in low-income and rural areas of the United States could be affected. This is for so-called J-1 visas for work and study-approved programs. Those were lifted back in June by Trump. The nonprofit that makes the residency match process says that the visa situation is getting a little better, but it's hard to know how many medical residents have had their careers completely derailed because their visas didn't arrive on time or were blocked by Trump's travel ban on 12 nations. The U.S. is expected to face a physicians shortage during the next 11 years, according to the Association of American Medical Colleges, and foreign medical residents fill a lot of those gaps in the healthcare system. 6,600 plus foreign-born international medical students got into U.S. programs this year. That's the most ever. Another 300 filled positions that went vacant after the match process was complete. Not all of the residents were affected by visa issues or the travel ban, but international medical graduates often take jobs in places where U.S. medical trainees tend not to go. It's not just that they're coming in and they want to work in big flashy centers on the coast. They're truly providing health care for all of America, that according to the National Resident Matching Program. Foreign medical residents work also in specialties that American applicants don't go into as much. For example, international residents are 40% of those in internal medicine, which is the prevention and treatment of chronic diseases like diabetes and heart disease. Americans don't do it as much.
Well, pay people and then educate your own people, and then you don't have that problem anymore. It's a radical concept. I mean, the problem with the West, and I mean this blanketly, is that we crap on the family. We prioritize career so much, all for the sake of money. We teach, we teach women especially that, hey, no, don't get married, don't have kids, because you should be just a nice little tax cow. That's all you're good for. And the government solution for that then at that point is to import a new workforce, whereas the exact opposite is the solution to this problem. I mean, take a page out of the Russian book, take a page out of the Hungarian book.
Let me just say,
having a family is a good thing.
I would say if the U.S. government made subsidized medical school and encouraged people to go to medical school from the United States, and for some reason we're all a bunch of dinguses and we'd just rather sit around and play video games and not go to medical school, then maybe we can turn overseas to import doctors.
Yeah, no,
but we don't
agree.
do that. We don't try to get Americans to do this. So therefore, I agree. This program is filling a problem that we created ourselves.
Correct.
I agree. If they made education affordable in the STEM, all these STEM classes and degrees, if they made it affordable for Americans to do that,
stop
to
sending
enter that
bombs
workforce.
to Ukraine and Israel,
right?
and everywhere else.
I know.
Don't send them anywhere else.
Invest here.
I'm close to it. I'm very.
We
close
literally
to
don't have enough bombs for ourselves in case the Canadians come.
I know a doctor that says he says that once you graduate med school, you're in debt, like obviously hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars,
which is insane.
And which is insane to become a doctor. And sure, you're going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars per year.
Well, you might. It,
depending on what you obviously focus on or specialize in.
Yeah.
But there are programs for debt forgiveness if you work 10 years, for example, at like a VA style hospital, like a VA hospital. They will help you, but you have to work 10 years. Like you have to work off your loan. Basically, it's like, like
it's
a
indentured
debt
servitude.
Yeah. It is, and that's the only way people can afford going to med school if that they feel like that's their calling. You don't want somebody that's going to be a doctor because they're like, oh, I'm going to make millions and millions of dollars. You want people that feel it in their heart, that they want to help people. And you want, that's what makes a good doctor, right? Between the doctor that's like, next, churn, so I can get my billing. You want the doctor, the kid that's dreamt of being a doctor his or her whole life, that care about like making people better, you need to help them get to school and
This
pay
is a
for
broad.
school.
This is part of it. This is a micro version of a broad problem. I think Robbie, you're going to agree with me. Look, the United States has no business importing or issuing visas for any profession whatsoever, as long as there's a single unemployed or underemployed American. Period. Like
Agreed.
It's like now, if you have someone like you have a shortage of doctors, okay, and you have one unemployed person. Literally, we should have like a government official go find that person and say, "Hey, how do you like to train to become a doctor?" and try to make that happen. It's like, not just wait around and say, "Oh, we just don't have anyone who could become a doctor. I don't know why."
Right.
And here's the funny part, right? Those people who are coming from overseas, they came from countries where their education was free.
Correct.
Right.
And that's my whole point.
Ridiculous.
What we are doing is that we are literally importing a new work class from pick the field from all around the world.
We would say this is an
STEM
upper,
thing is a great
upper
example.
collar,
because we
white
have
collar.
zero interest in educating our own people because
or retraining them.
Well, let me ask you, Robbie, where you're at in Montana,
Yeah.
how many non-American doctors do you see at your hospital system?
We probably have about 100 of them.
Out of how many?
Total doctors, maybe 500.
Wow.
So 20%.
In rural Montana.
Yeah, because of H-1B visas. I'm telling you, it is a systemic problem.
Yeah, it is.
And if you point it out, did you get called a racist? I don't care what you call me. Listen, my son, he turns 16 next month. His quality of life is going to be less than mine because it's going to be harder and harder for him to get jobs because, one, automation, two, the workforce is changing. Third, we're importing every swinging dick from the third world. He should not be competing against Ethiopia and Somalia. He shouldn't be competing against some little peckerwood over in Nigeria.
I mean,
where you could train to be a doctor in high school, apparently, as we learned from a certain female doctor.
Yeah, who I fired. But I mean, but no, I mean, it's just wild. It's completely insane. Like, for example, most people don't realize this. To be a nurse in the United States, all you got to do is to get a license. To get a license, what you have to do is that you have to pass the board. If you pass the board, you get that license. What we do, though, is that we require people to go to get a 2-year degree that they technically do not need, racking up hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt. The way that it used to be, and I actually tried to do this myself to go to be a surgical tech, because again, it's a 2-year degree, is go in and do an internship. They won't do it because of special interests from big education. They squash any kind of on-the-job training.
That's 100%.
That's
true.
the problem.
I have one of my former in-laws. She was a doctor in Taiwan. She was a brain surgeon. She married an American, moved to the United States, and went to work as a doctor. Her brain surgery experience didn't qualify her to put a Band-Aid on a kid here in the United States.
Correct.
She had to go to medical school from scratch as if she was a derp. And she had to start completely at ground zero. It's exactly what Robbie said. Big education. It's a scam. Now I could see them saying like, okay, well, we want to make sure you're English and take a few classes to make sure your English nomenclature and all your terminology is sharp, so you can talk to your colleagues efficiently, blah, blah, blah. See if they do, what things we do differently here than Taiwan. But Taiwan's a modern country, right? I mean, and she's a brain surgeon. I think a brain surgeon can be a GP in the United States. But
yes.
But they don't, they don't. But literally, and that's it. That's how
when I worked in the car business. When I worked 100%. In the car business, when I first started out, when I was a little 17, 18-year-old receptionist at the world's biggest car dealership by volume, Longo Toyota, they had hundreds of car salesmen, right? And this is my first real job, right? Like I'm 18, I'm a young adult, I got a real job. And first time I'd met people, hundreds of salesmen from all over the world. They spoke like pretty much every language in the world. And I can't tell you how many former doctors, lawyers, and engineers that I met from the Middle East that had to be car salesmen in the United States, because you don't need anything other than to pass a background check and, get a thumbprint in California to get your car salesman license. But I met people like Lebanese people that were freaking engineers in Lebanon. They came to the US and because of the bureaucracy to get through, you have to start school all over. And they were like, that's exactly what they said was, I can't go into my field here because your country makes it impossible for me to start. I can't afford to go back to school. I have a family now because I'm 45 years old.
Go back home.
Whereas
go back home.
Anybody, like let's say any three of us, we can all move to Taiwan and teach English in a college. They'll hire any of us just because we're Native Americans, English speakers. It's like, okay, well, obviously teaching grammar and all that is its own thing, but they teach you how to do it.
Sure.
But the point is, like, they know you have the knowledge. It's common sense, right? Like in America, like obviously someone who's born and raised in the United States is probably going to speak English fine, certainly better than any Taiwanese person is going to be able to speak it and teach it. And they know that. So it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, the bureaucracy we have here for our own people to fill these positions of, as engineers and doctors.
Manila, it's a cartel. It's like they're protecting their prerogatives.
Yeah, it's like, for example,
crazy.
My wife is a medical coder. So we both work, both of our full-time jobs are in medicine. I work behind the scenes building records. She's a biller and a coder. So everything has an ICD-10 code. So you have to go through, and then if you have a surgery, for example, every part has a ICD-10. It's kind of like a SKU in a retail store. To do that job, keep in mind, all that's required legally is to be certified. She still had to get that 2-year degree because the entire system is completely screwed up. And that's the biggest thing. That's one of the biggest letdowns about Trump and his whole flip-flop and his betrayal of America first. If you want to make America first, you blow up that swamp that has its neck on the working class of the United States of America. You get that foot off our necks, the American people will start doing the jobs that they won't do. It's because legally, a lot of times you can't without going hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt. So why would you? So if I told you, Manila, that I could give you a new career right now in medical coding, and I could pay you $25 an hour, but you have to go into debt by $140,000 to do it, would you? Because that's the choice that we had to make for my wife to get her job.
Hail to the no.
That's the problem. And most people don't understand this. So whenever I come out so hard about immigration, it's not because I'm a racist dick. It's because immigration is literally enabling the system to continue to crush the American worker. If you cut off the spigot of indentured servants coming in to serve these corporate oligarchs, that's when you get change. It's never going to happen as long as you keep importing the entire fucking third world.
Or the upper crust of those third world countries to come do what would be really good, high paying jobs for Americans. So,
all immigration should be ended for like 50 years. All of it.
I don't know about 50, but
well, I would prefer 80. I'm trying to be nice.
We definitely, like Ted said, and you pointed out, we definitely, if we want to increase American STEM and American productivity in those fields, we need to make it accessible to our own people. And we don't do that. We choose to add the highest price tag on our own education of our own people that would later go on to stay and serve in our own communities in these fields. Instead of doing that, we're just giving visas to anybody with a medical degree from wherever. But apparently Trump is pausing that. So that's a start, Robbie.
It's not.
We got to stop. We got to stop because I got to run. I'm over time. But yeah, that's and Ted, if you just want to quickly read, Robbie, I'm going to kick you to the back. If you want to quickly read the NVIDIA news, I won't comment on that one, but that's kind of a shocking.
You think it's important, or all right?
We'll have it tomorrow. Save it till
let's-
tomorrow.
Let's do it tomorrow. You should take off. Go.
Okay.
Go.
All right.
Yeah, go away.
We got to run. Thank you guys for being here. Robbie, I'm going to kick you out. Thank you guys for being here. That's going to do it for us on the TMI Show. I'm Manila Chan. That's Ted Rall. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Oh, Robbie, I forgot. Let me add you back. Do we have an ad that we have to read? Okay.
Not right now.
Bye.
Thank you. Okay, that does it, guys. Make sure you smash that like button, the follow button, subscribe, and all of that. We'll be back tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern. Adios, amigos. Bye.